I feel very fortunate to call this next guest a close and very dear friend. Dave Grund was a banker, an executive, a very high powered one at that, and is above all an amazing human being who has the courage to be open about his true self and his feelings. A treat in the business world today where leaders choose to mask out of a need for protection. In this conversation, which turns genuinely emotional and includes even a few tears, he gifts us his genuine feelings and thoughts of having navigated a world that isn't built for authenticity but masking. Give this a listen and then find him on LinkedIn to thank him for this genuine moment and to join him in building an authentic future that signals a better life and a better mental health status for us all. Hello and welcome back to NeuroSpicy at Work. I have someone who is a very, very dear friend today with us, and him and I have spent many days and nights talking about mental health challenges in the workplace, challenges outside of the workplace, and what it is like being that person that's attempting to fix it for everyone else. So welcome to the show, Dave, and thank you for accepting to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're also
That's
former
right. We
bankers,
are
remember?
former reformed.
That's how we met.
We met
Yes.
in the financial industry, and I don't know how many people listening to this now, but one of the main things we wanted to touch on today is that we are essentially execs that had to mask all of their lives. So that's kind of a good starting point. Would you describe yourself that way, Dave?
Uh, oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest challenge was when I was working and living in Russia, and I mean, it was also the biggest success and the highest level I ever achieved was being vice president of the largest privately owned bank in Russia 20 years ago and launching the first mobile banking app. But I had to, not that I had to, but I figured I don't need the conflict and a potential misunderstanding of for being a openly gay man. So I kind of like not hid it, but didn't talk about it. And so, yeah, yeah. Anyways, that's 20 years ago. Yeah, learned a lot in
Yeah, it
20
feels like
years.
yesterday, though, doesn't it?
I think over now that I'm 52, I think like I kind of think, okay, was it really worth it? If I could have done it differently, I would have. But at the same time, I couldn't have. I didn't have this realization. I didn't have this kind of like fear of being. I had the fear of being judged for that and being, I don't know, discriminated or treated differently, especially as a foreigner in a country like Russia.
So let's
Um,
let's paint that
yeah.
picture a little
So
bit for people, because I think it's interesting, in particular since you're, kind of out of that world, and it doesn't quite the trauma we live through in finance doesn't quite affect us as bad as it used to, all of us. But I think it's really interesting to talk about the fact that at one point in our careers we had been up there and as typical and as normal as cookie cutter would have it, but we were essentially living with a number of things that we were covering and being super spicy in many ways, right? So in your case, you were obviously, I don't know how much of this is something you want to disclose, but I know we don't have a lot of secrets from people ourselves.
I told you, I'm an open book. Either people accept me for who I am or they don't, and that's either way is fine. What's most important is that we all accept ourselves for who we are as much as possible, good, bad, and the ugly. It's fine, but I don't. I think that having other people accept me is less of a priority, especially when it comes to
Right.
working with people, because I want to work with people who actually accept and support me and celebrate
That's
me for who I
amazing,
am.
though. I think that the journey between then and now is kind of what we want to focus on and see if we can find anything to give people to take from it. But in kind of take flashback to that time when you were essentially within the belly of the beast, you were in a corporate environment, you were attempting to tick all the boxes so you make sure that you're not being jumped over in promotions and stuff. What was the conversation like when it comes to both? And I mean, in the business environment, I don't necessarily mean in Russia, because obviously that's a very special environment, but you had been in between markets,
Yeah.
both in Europe and in North America. What was that time like 2022, 23 years ago in terms of saying you're queer or spicy in any which way in the workplace as compared to today?
Um, a lot harder, but I just want to. I don't want it to seem like it's so easy for young people today. I think they have a different kind of challenge, and it's more about like because it's so you can be whatever you want now, and it's easier. And I think that produces its own challenges there and of itself. I mean, admittedly, in this working at this bank, I don't know. It wasn't. It never came up as an issue or something. I mean, but the fact is, I mean, there was a nightlife back then. I mean, it was never really talked about, but there was like there were no like raids or something on bars and stuff, and it was I don't know how to explain it. So there was like the underground life. Um, yeah. So, but I don't know. I mean, you asked about like uh, what question would I ask
Right.
myself? Is
And
that
if you
what it
were to
was?
kind
Or
of compare it to
yeah,
today, what are the bigger differences? Is it just the fact that it was more underground to have a life than it is these days?
yeah, absolutely. And it's more kind of like this whole, even on LinkedIn, it's not specifically Russia, but I think that, you know, the pronouns he, him I have, and talking about these things more openly and more accepting to something that is not you, and bringing that into like as a positive as opposed to, okay, you're different, so you don't belong. And I think this is the whole kind of um, yeah, cultural diversity and DEI and all this. So for me, it's like it should. I think now we're at a point in life where the business world is finally realizing that you've got to take people as they are, and it's not about DEI or diversity. I mean, it is just about accepting people for who they are. There's no need to have a label for it. We needed this label to identify it when it was an issue that, but it wasn't like that. But ultimately, um, yeah, it's like, okay, for me, it's not gay marriage. It's just marriage
Right.
between two men, right? Like as an example. But at the time, you had to kind of like say gay marriage. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, I think that we need to identify things sort of a certain way, and then those labels should disappear because it's no longer necessary to talk about that because it's part
Right.
of the not normalcy. I don't like to say normalcy, but part
Right.
of everyday
I like
life.
that. So maybe
Yeah.
this podcast,
I kind of went off on a tangent.
maybe this
Sorry.
podcast one day will just be at work, no longer spicy at work. These days, we're still in this, in kind of in between. Then, when obviously life was so difficult for yourself and everyone else, who was practically in the closet at work in so many ways, both in terms of what we were like as a person and in
Yeah.
terms of how many of us were unable to talk about our real selves and how trauma informed we were, because that's another thing we
Huh.
have in common as former execs who were living with trauma and yet we're not discussing any of this openly. And so the difference between then, when it was all in the closet, and this apotheotic future in which we're not going to even have labels, it's just going to be humans and accepted fully, is we're in this in between world where, as you can see, more and more people are attempting to be more authentic, even in our segment and our ages, right? We have to a degree the new generation that's a lot more open and a lot more able to discuss who they are. They come with the readme, but as you said, that comes with its own challenges. And then you have possibly the other extreme where no one still will ever disclose anything for fear of looking some type of way. But in between, we're all trying to change perception in our segment, where we say, look, this is who we were all along. This is who we're willing to talk about, what we're willing to talk about, and then kind of hope that this transition moves faster. You're doing a lot in this space, and that's one of the reasons we really wanted to talk today, is because you've practically left that corporate life to do something about people's mental health and people's ability of showing up truly. So walk us through that journey. When did you decide you had to improve people's lives?
Uh, honestly, and quite openly, and this is the first time I'm admitting this on a kind of like open public channels, when I had my near-death experience, December 8th, 2016. And since that time, I don't know, I think I would never wish someone to go through what I went through, but it also was so eye-opening. I don't want to get emotional. Um, it just made me realize life is all about living, not about like we think that something's important, but it's not. Yeah. Being true to ourselves is the most important thing we can be.
Oh, thank you for that. It's rare that people are open and honest enough to feel their feelings on a podcast. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. But going,
Being emotional is because it still is not a challenge. It's like I am an emotional and sensitive person. So for me, talking about something that was almost turned up in a that is ceased to exist 8 years ago, is sometimes it's humbling. It's humbling because I'm forever grateful for the fact that it's like it was a reset. It was a reset on who I am and what I am. Like clearing out all the cache, not CASH, but CACHE, and letting me be my potentially pure, authentic self, whatever that means, based on like no doubt, no second guessing, and trying to just be who I am and trying to help other people be the best version of themselves. Because I think that there's no I get nothing from like criticizing someone else or like saying that's bad or this is good or whatever. If I can help someone be a better version of themselves by helping them become aware of something, then great. And I think that's why I'm still the same person in terms of like emotional, curious, a little bit crazy. But I'm much more in service of others because I think that's how we evolve as humans. We help people become the best versions of themselves, and it takes a village, right?
I mean, I wish more people, and I think you've already helped people by just doing what you did right now. I have to believe that whoever stumbles upon this is heartened to hear that it's okay to say, I've had a moment or several moments, God forbid, many people have several brushes with death, really, where you have to take accountability and hold and decide whether you're going to invest in yourself and who you genuinely should be, or keep playing to society's hopes of you. So that's really
let me speak clear. Like it wasn't attempt at suicide, but I'm responsible for whatever happened, and that's the biggest key, is like accepting and owning to whatever, because it's so easy to point the finger at someone else because it's easier than to look at yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself. And I think that when you can do that, there's so much power, because then I don't want to say nothing can shake you, but you have a much more solid foundation in who you are as a person.
When you take back that agency. And I think that's really interesting. It's hard to think of it that way, in particular if some of the trauma that's happened to you was very early on, and we all, both yourself and I, are living with some degree of complex PTSD from childhood trauma, and we know that those bits, there's no accountability to be taken on that, and we know that. But obviously, as we make choices and as we go further in life, we do put ourselves in riskier situations when we're and or take questionable decisions when we come from that background. So I think it's really important for people to be maybe more forensic about and honest about the type of trauma they've encountered, and then say this bucket is something I could have learned from, and this bucket I had no agency towards, and I can't blame myself for. So both those perspectives.
I think it's also I think one of the things people ask me, how did you come to this realization and all this, what's the way to do it? And everybody has a different path, everybody has a different way of getting there. But I think what's really helpful for me, and I think for most people, would be just to ask yourself why. In each situation, why did I react that way? Why did I do that? Why do I want to do that? Because it's not about like doubting yourself. It's like trying to really understand what motivates you, what's driving you, why did I react this way? Why did I decide this? Why do I like what I like? You know? And I think that's questioning why it's like, the kid who like something happens and you said the parent will explain, and then the kid will say, but why? And it'll keep going. but I think that's how it should be, like, because you should be so curious to understand and to kind of challenge your existing ingrained beliefs, because that's the only way you're going to change.
100%.
That's not to say
totally. And I
yeah.
don't want
So
to
it's like,
interrupt you, but super
as soon as you
important that
start,
we say this to people again. Take whatever responsibility you can out of it, but equally, like I say, don't over snow yourself into how it's your fault,
no,
because
you can't run a marathon without training. And I think that, right, if you want to change, you have to take baby steps, and the first step is becoming the observer, and asking why. And that's the first step, because you first step is to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then you can start making changes, because if you can't do everything at once. And it's like, this is the other thing I learned, is like, the inner critic, it has no place, because criticizing yourself never achieves anything. You couldn't do better. I don't know how to say, like, I used to always have a huge inner critic, and it still kind of comes up, and comes up from behind, and I'm like, okay, I acknowledge you're existing, but I don't need to listen to you. So it's like, you are an observer of everything that's going on inside of you. You're just like keenly watching and observing what's going on inside of you, without any judgment, without any, without trying to change at the moment, but like, I say, aha, that's interesting. That's why I'm thinking.
And I think that the reason it's super crucial that people think under those terms today is because you probably, as well as I do, and I'm sure anyone listening to this has seen it, there's more and more being uncovered between the connection towards however much trauma an individual has had and their presentation in terms of neurodiversity, and with more and more of us finally getting a diagnosis and finally understanding where we land on life spectrum. I know how big of an affirmation that is. I think it's good for us to be genuine in our, like I say, observation and critical thinking around existing trauma that could have added to an already non-neurotypical makeup.
Yeah. You know what's the biggest kind of aha in this whole journey was that when my friend said to me, "Hey, maybe you're ADHD," and then I started looking into it, and I was like, "Okay, this is why I'm so emotional. This is why I'm so uh, I don't want to say addictive personality, or however. Like, when I go down one path, then I keep going down that, regardless of what's detrimental to me." So when something is, you understand something,
Right.
it makes things so much easier to accept, because you think that, why am I doing this? Why am I such a bad person? That's what I thought before, right? And the ADHD explains that is normal for ADHD. So that was such a relief to understand that. And I just also want to say, you are not your diagnosis, right? Yeah, it's part of, like, it helps you to understand and navigate things better. And I say that you should never be afraid of finding out more about yourself. But at the end of the day, even if you're in therapy or someone, you should always be comfortable with whatever someone gives you advice or gives you insight or whatever. If it doesn't feel right, if your gut feeling is like, no, I don't agree with that, get a second opinion. Or I'm all about, like, trusting yourself and having the guidance of external professionals or people that want to guide you. But at the end of the day, they are not you. Yeah. And you know yourself best, whether you think it or not. Even your parents don't know you best. Even your kids don't. You know
and
yourself
you're probably
best.
the best suited person to both acknowledge, and not probably, certainly the best suited person to both acknowledge and empower yourself with acceptance towards what you found out. So I really love that you've put it that way. I ask everyone on this podcast, what was your aha moment when you thought, right, I was different all along, but this is the thing I belong to a degree. But like you very well pointed out, that doesn't define you in any which way. It just adds to the colorful palette of who you thought you were as a human to begin with. But then if you take that further and you use that lens, do you think maybe when you started coming out of the, I don't know, I would say out of the corporate haze and more into the more accepting way of thinking towards wellness and mental health and mental makeup and neurotypical versus non-neurotypical makeups, do you think that you've experienced some of this that other people are describing as autistic burnout? There are a number of other terms to it where maybe you found that the constructs you had were no longer working for you quite as well.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the thing. Like when you try to be that which society accepts as normal, it's so people who are neurodiverse in the sense of like that it's trying to be like what is accepted and considered normal is such it's like swimming upstream in such a strong current that it's no wonder that you're going to get burnout. And then for someone else who is quote unquote normal or part of this group who's not neurodiverse or as neurodiverse, they don't get it because they're not in that space. But I think that that's also our role as like being different is to educate the other people and not assume that they know, and help them to understand that there are people who act and are different, not because of I don't know. I'm emotional, I'm sensitive, and people would say you should not react like that. It's not professional. Well, but it's me, right? So what's professional, not professional? It's like, and then when I say I have ADHD, I say, oh, okay, then it's acceptable. But it should be acceptable in general. Like you should understand why someone is reacting the way they do.
No,
Did that
it did.
answer
I
the
mean, I
question?
hope
I
it
wonder if
did. I
I'm
don't know how any of this lands with people, but I hope some of it is resonating. And I think it's really empowering for women in particular to hear that men at work have sometimes been painted with the same too emotional brush that we have had to deal with in the workplace for forever. It's one of those things that you have to live with,
men have the
unfortunately, as
hardest.
a woman. You can never look too emotional.
But it should no. I think you might joke about that, but I think that the reason we have a lot of problems in the world is because of cis white men who basically white straight men, hetero men who basically have not brought enough emotion into any situation. And I don't mean to be derogatory, but I think that is if you only are transactional and you're not feeling what you're doing, that's a I mean that's a recipe for disaster. Same as being too emotional. So it's about a mix. And I've got a friend who basically started this founded his startup that is basically helping men to have conversations with therapists, because men don't get help, even though women are. This is statistically proven that women are more open about talking about their emotions, their feelings, and their challenges. Men need to step up their game in that. Yeah, this whole thing like boys don't cry is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's like this tough macho kind of thing. I think that a woman can be macho and a man can be sensitive and crying. Like I think that these gender specific norms is so out of place. Like the woman stays home and cooks, like from 1960s. You see, father comes home. It's like
really big topic. I think this one, and it's kind of fundamental that we are clear that what's happening today in society and in the workplace, in particular, when it comes to male identity and this insane demand of removing humanity from for the mere reason of having a different chromosomal structure has to stop, and it has to start with men being more courageous to investigate and allow themselves to be not on Fridays slightly more emotional, but on
vulnerable.
Exactly that, but be able to recognize emotions and accept that they have to become an emotional being is crucial, and it is the only way we're going to stave off this insane epidemic of male suicide we're witnessing every day. So if we and I want to be clear, this is yes, it does depend on males being more courageous, but it is in no way reduced to males. There are segments upon segments of society that are female-led, where that same mentality of boys don't cry is being propagated. And unfortunately, we haven't made a lot of room for men to feel their feelings and to be safely uh, in a space where they can be emotional and vulnerable, and that needs changing right away. We're bringing up a new generation that's going to fall into the same patterns despite their better tries. I mean, we have these very young males that are coming to the world with a much more open perspective, but if we're going to throw them into the same society and the workplace where they're expected to be different, we're wasting another generation.
And you're right, and you hit a kind of nail on the head that basically what's missing is that there's no we have feedback mechanisms in the workplace for how we perform in our productivity, but we don't have for how other people make us feel, or how there's no, well, that time where we discussed this, and there's no feedback loop for emotions, and that's such a missing part because we're humans. But yeah, it's people say, oh, okay, it's not part of the business world, is how you feel, but it is. And I think that the challenge is, and that's why I go back to that whole point of why the world is the way that it is that there hasn't been enough emotions, there has not been enough feelings. And to say that, oh, that's not professional, well, but it's me. Yeah. So I think that we created something, governments, companies, whatever, that don't function like nature does. Yeah. Nature is an ecosystem. We need to take account and consideration and respect and discuss every aspect of ourselves. It's not about sharing all of our personal life at work, but it's to be not exactly, but to be able to be expressive as we are outside of work, as we are at work.
Right.
Different hats,
right.
but
Very, very true.
Right?
It all does come back to this kernel of, and we both are running startups that are attempting to make the world place a better place. And we know what an uphill battle it is and how absolutely impossible it can be particularly in some economies and some industries where it's worse than others and so on. But realistically, it all does boil down to this. If you're a professional, you're not meant to be emotional. And if you start excluding these two, then you literally have no basis of doing better in a place where we are spending the vast majority of our lives, and where this attitude of society towards what's normatively correct is being propagated. So undoubtedly that's where it needs to change, where at the very core of enterprises, it's no longer unprofessional to be human.
But yeah, and it's funny because people say, well, how does it affect the bottom line? And I mean, the bottom line means that it's like less people quiet quitting, less people calling in sick to burnout or whatever. I mean, there was a statistic that just came out so far in the first half of this year in Germany. There's like 1 in 7 people called in sick due to, I forget what it was. It was like a combination of like stress, sick, but it's just the number people calling in sick due to burnout it keeps going up every year, and in a country like Germany. So it's not sustainable the way that we're going forward. We need to talk about these things because all this stuff is preventable. Yeah, it's not just talking is not going to solve problems, but it's going to hopefully manage and not let it get worse, right? Because as soon as you're able to talk about something, it shifts the perspective of the pressure. The pressure is a little
That's
bit
what we're
released.
hoping with this. We're hoping that we reach enough people. They don't necessarily need to tell anyone else that they're doing that, but they have that thought later on of evaluating, am I allowing for other humans to be emotional around me? Am I allowing for me to be emotional? What fear is holding me back? What would that necessarily do to my professional life? And even just starting to break this down and think of these different aspects. is what's going to open up the workplace to the degree that this new generation coming in will have a space to be themselves. Like you well said, they do have a lot more awareness as to who they are. We have a whole generation of young men that are a lot more EQ'd than their fathers and grandfathers ever were. But equally, if they will then come into an environment that will shun them for it, or not advance them professionally, or teach them that it's still not acceptable, then we haven't done all of that work that society is trying to put into the rights of people that are different, who are, let's face it, not a minority, but very likely not necessarily a majority either, but at least on par with everyone else.
Yeah, but I think, and yeah, and I also think that, like, it's not but and yes and um, I think that because I see myself and saw myself always as different. I don't know. I've always been so much more creative, and I see the world through a different lens, and that's sometimes a burden, but also it's a superpower, because when you're able to see it through a different lens, you're able to come up with ideas that nobody else has. And I go back to kind of like, okay, it's at work is what we're talking about. I think the education system needs to change to teach empathy and to teach kids how to deal with their emotions, because without that, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You're always going to get sidetracked if are a slave to your emotions, if you don't know how to manage and process those things, right? How to process disappointment, or um, shame, or embarrassment, or fear,
Right.
or shyness. We don't teach you to. Kids are not
Incredibly good
taught
point.
this, right?
Incredibly good point. It does have to start with education. There are a couple of countries in the world where that's attempted. There's some signals from Australia that the idea of EQ is being now, or emotional intelligence is now being almost graded in some schools, in some places. I think that should be universally the case around the world. And it's insane that we have gone through
Yeah,
life without teaching people
work or
the
school.
most important social skills they would need further. But absolutely, this needs to change. But even if you look at popular science these days, you'll see that there's a shift. There's a lot more openness to allowing the blankets of society that were otherwise cut off from being allowed to be expressive to more access it. But is that shift fast enough, in particular in a world where we have to kind of kick into gear these days so that we become more human quickly before machines take the rest of the jobs that they can do?
Yeah, that's but that's the thing. If we don't do it now, then machines will replace us. The thing that machines cannot replace, and I don't ever believe fully that it will be, like, even if you say that something becomes sentient, I don't know. It's like, I think that's the thing that humans have that any computer will never have, is that this soul, this real, connection with that which is the world, the nature, and whatever, right? Um, that's another reason I think that this is imperative. Like, because if you don't change and you don't adjust to becoming that which is not replaceable, then it will be replaced. So this is another motivation, not to the bottom line, but to pure existence. If you want your company and your teams to exist in the future, you need to shift to become that's something that
Right. And
cannot
I
be
get on this high
replaced.
horse all the time daily for work, and I'm almost loath to repeat it, but it is surprising to me that anyone is attempting to be a leader in this day and age without cultivating that being the only thing that remains uniquely human in the leadership side of things, which obviously the decision making will be a lot more easy to outsource to whoever does it better. The bits where you micromanage are outsourceable. I don't know why anyone would need them. But the parts where you are the human that's there to be inspirational and to be guiding and to be empathic, those are supposedly the last, at least, to be replaced. So the fact that leaders around the world are not getting themselves in better shape from those perspectives faster is just part of this insane denial they live through, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's two-sided. It's like you fear the change, and by embracing it, you acknowledge the fact that it's going to happen. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword. If I don't do anything, I'm safe for now. But if I do something, I invite this change
Right.
in. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's a dichotomy that of like
Right.
analysis paralysis, but it's coming in any case. Yeah, I think this whole traditional kind of org chart from top down and big boss and little middle manager and all that. I honestly think that that will not disappear, but it will evolve to like circles. And like, I like to talk about holacracy, but I think that when there are systems that can ensure that we are being ethical, responsible, and whatnot in terms of like automating certain decisions, then we need to be able to embrace this aspect that is not that,
Right.
which is like, you know what I'm saying? Like just to be people, to share and communicate ideas. So I see the future not being, you know, I have a manager, but we are in a circle together. We are a team of individuals that come together to do a certain task, and then we disband and we come together. I think the future organization is lots of this coming together, doing stuff and disbanding and then coming, and it's continuously shifting, like, you know, evolving, like I don't know what to. Yeah, you know, it's not like
Right.
a set
It would be
pyramid or
dynamic
something. It's the shape
teaming
is
and
always
reteaming.
changing
Absolutely.
depending on the situation, depending on the external factors, the success rate, you know, all these different things. I think that it's a continuously evolving
Right.
organization,
Yes.
yeah? A living organization.
Yes, I hope we're not that far from it. I really like that perspective. The ability to dynamically team and reteam in particular, then it will even more underline whether or not people have the capability. So the fact that we're not training people in doing just that is blowing my mind these days. But you're right. It's because the vast majority of the business world is stuck in a wishful thinking pattern of hopefully everything's going to go back to it being 1994 any day now, and that's very unlikely.
I think the reason that we also many of us think that that might happen is because COVID kind of it changed and stopped many things, but many things went back to as they were before. So I think that there is that we're influenced. If Corona hadn't happened, I don't think we'd be having these thoughts as much, because like some big thing happened, stopped the world. And this, I mean, AI and technology advancing is same but different. It's not going to stop the world, but it's definitely going to change the way that we do business and interact with each other. So I don't know. Would it be okay if I
Please
talk
do,
about my startup
absolutely.
idea?
I'm sure people want to hear, in particular, because you've
Yeah.
spent so much time trying to
Yeah.
land this very concept. Please let us know what the idea is.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all have habits, right? And so my idea is grounded in we have digital habits, and everything that we're doing has some kind of like leaves some kind of trace, or has a data trail, right? And what I want to do is take all those different data that we're giving out to different companies, and they're profiting from our use of their services, take it and put it into like your own little data pool, and we use artificial intelligence to help it extrapolate different assumptions that over time will become more and more accurate with you as a person or user, correcting, adjusting, or rejecting the assumptions that the AI has, all in the goal to help you to become the best version of yourself. So I say, like, I'm trying to empower people to become the superhero of their own mental health, because I think that there's not enough being done to help people help themselves. To, you know, yes, we say this, we say that, we have different tools that can help us, but there's no continuous feedback loop that runs on autopilot. And this is why I love this idea, because it's every person will have a different success story, or whatever you want to call it, from it. And that's what I love about it, because I'm just building the infrastructure. People make it what they need it for themselves, right? So it's kind of like the analogy of like, okay, unless I look in the mirror and I see, okay, you know, I've lost 15 kilos. We were talking about this. Unless I see that I have a stomach, then I can't step on a scale and see how much maybe weight I need to lose. So it's like the subjective reflection on these habits, and then having some kind of actual analytical decision-making thing that could help you. You're always the ultimate person who's going to make a decision of whether you want to do something, but we don't have. That's a missing link. We're doing all this, putting all this stuff out. That's why there's doom scrolling. That's why there's anxiety. That's why there's all this other stuff. Even if someone's bullied online, I think that this platform could help people better understand how to become more resilient, right? I'm not trying to solve world hunger or something. I'm trying to help people help themselves manage the things that they're doing, like the daily stress and struggles
I
of
love it. So
people's
more
lives.
of a
Yeah.
of
And
a life, a genuine life assistant that you have created yourself
yeah,
between you and the ability of artificial intelligence, and together you're creating a story that
yeah.
empowers you to be a better version of yourself. I absolutely love it.
If you choose to, and that's the thing. So for me, it's like we're already giving all this data to different companies. So why not take a Why not take a copy of that which we're giving out and use that and plug it in somewhere and let the magic of ChatGPT or whatever you want to call it, not ChatGPT, but an LLM or whatever, give you insights that you wouldn't have never realized on your own. And I'm looking forward to that. Actually, like I want to be like, oh wow, but it's like the bridge to where you are and where you want to be. But how do you know that you need therapy? How do you know that meditation will help you unless there's something that is able to look at your habits and make some extrapolation and assumptions that, hey, maybe you'd benefit from this meditation app, or maybe you'd benefit from doing a cooking course or learning a new skill or something like that. But we don't know until we have this feedback on our existing habits. So I think that banning certain social media apps and whatnot is not the solution in all cases. In some cases, yes, for young people, but if you have this little kind of like um, the best friend you never had but always wanted talking in your ear saying, hey, maybe you want to take a break from Instagram. It's up to you. But, not being judgmental, not basing it on some kind of linear thing like time, but really saying, hey, maybe you want to take a break, like whispering, whispering in your ear, hey, maybe you want to take a break. But it's the best part is like there's no shame, no judgment, no nothing. Like it's based on your own. You can't deny
Right.
what it comes up with. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like it's basing it on
Right. You
things
can't
you've
argue
done.
with your own
So you
actions
can't
and
say, no, I
data.
didn't do that. You
Absolutely.
did it.
I love it. I love it. I think, look, you
No, no,
heard
no,
it
no.
here first, but one day this should be ubiquitous in your device, and it would have been.
That's my goal. That's honestly my goal because for me, I'm all about impact. I want to empower people to be able to do this if they choose to. And I ultimately I want to build the infrastructure where other people can build solutions. I don't want to make it just for me. I want to, or from me. I have the idea. I'm planting the seed, but it needs a lot of people to help, like make it a reality that is like, yeah,
This is
like the internet.
a
That's
really
how I
good
would like.
open call, and I think I'll put a couple of links to your LinkedIn profile so people can get in touch. And I know there are pockets of people building various things around the world, and I do think that this is not the time for either of us to be super proprietary, but if anything, for all of us to come together and attempt to solve
No,
this together because it is an emergency. The mental health crisis at work is an emergency.
it's
The
really
way we're looking at people being resilient in the workplace and not losing their lives to lack of knowledge and lack of empowerment in terms of technology and tools is an emergency. So for that to solve, anyone listening to this who has been seeing our startup work online can just get in contact. We'd love to hear. We're more than open to any kind of partnerships, and we know that this needs to land at the right side of things soon. But meanwhile, I think it's a really hopeful message, and I thank you for telling us both the very raw story of your experience and kind of where you see it going so that we help other people through it. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Dave. I'll ask you back again soon. And I hope everyone got something out of
Thank you
it
so
and that
much.
they will get in contact with yourself, and we can finally see a genuine superhero of our mental health made by ourselves plus the data that we've given AI. I love that. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Duena. Bye.